Well, back to China. And it's starting to look like Beijing's willingness to mend the relationship with Australia is being driven by some internal pressure on energy supplies, as I mentioned at the start of the program. Now, no doubt government ministers have put in a lot of work at thawing the relationship, but I don't think they can take the entire credit. Overnight, there was a surge in investment in ASX-listed coal producers as expectations grew that Chinese authorities will lift the unofficial ban on Australia's coal exports. Of course, given the fact China is suffering from high commodity prices due to an absence of competition from Australian mines and another surge in COVID infections, which has sapped domestic spending and confidence, one can't help but think this is a thawing of convenience. The why, though, is not at all that important. Joining me now to discuss this is Nationals MP David Littleproud. David, thank you very much for your time. What are you hearing both abroad and on the ground here about the possibility that Beijing, that China will take back our coal?
Well, look, this is a positive movement from the Chinese government. They obviously are in a predicament where they have to accept it, but what this is a real lesson to the Australian people is that you don't become bullied. You stand up to bullies, you hold the values and principles of your nation, the values and principles that over 100,000 Australians have lost their lives defending. And when you do that, invariably the world will look at you and they'll look properly on you as a good global citizen, and those that want to bully you will be stood down. And they've now realised that they have nowhere else to go but to come back to the source of much of their energy and much of their clean energy coming from the cleanest coal source in the world right here in Australia. And so we've always said that we're prepared to have dialogue, to have that conversation, but they won't be predicated on conditions. And you don't put conditions on another foreign country. We've made that clear, and we hope that this government continues on with those values and principles. But we stood up to China, and we made that clear. And I think that that's a very strong lesson that the Australian people should take, that if you compromise on those values and principles, your nation will be weaker for it, but invariably it will get to a juncture where bullies have to stand down and have to re-enter the global community the way they should and act the way they should with other good global citizens.
So does it really matter why they might take back our coal, even if it is for the convenience of keeping their people warm for the first time in 2 years? This is about the restoration of our exports, which is too important just to pass over.
Oh, exactly, and look, we've always made it clear we're prepared to trade with them, but not on their conditions, but on the conditions of on good international law. We abide by the international law of trade and won't be coerced by anybody. And in fact, the fact that they now want to take it is obviously circumstantial. Whether the facts that they're having challenges in their own country, and that's fine, and we accept that. But the reality is that this is a strong lesson not to compromise on those values and principles. That's why Australia is a strong country. That's why Australia is a great country. And how they re-enter that market will be about them and culturally about how they save face, and that's fine. We're happy to do that, but we will continue to have that dialogue. We'd encourage the government to continue to have dialogue with them because that is the best way to resolve differences, but not compromising values or principles or our democracy or sovereignty is not.
It'd be an incredible shot in the arm for the mining industry for coal to be exported again to China. Do you think it would therefore be one step closer to re-establishing trade deals on our other produce?
Well, we hope so, and that's one of the conditions I hope this current government upholds, is that if we are to go back to the table of negotiation and discussion and dialogue, is that the first thing they need to do is remove all the coercive economic impacts that they have put on our industries. That's the first thing they should do, and I think I congratulate the government on making that as a core principle. They should stick to that, and I hope they do. So this actually opens up many opportunities, and it's much needed, particularly in my home state of Queensland, when you've got a Queensland Labor government that has imposed a royalty tax on the resource industry up there that is the largest in the world, that's actually destroying investment confidence. When you've got the Japanese ambassador taking the extraordinary step of coming out and saying that this will actually shatter investment confidence in Queensland resources, we actually do need another market player, and it is good that China's been able to see that, but we also need state governments to understand that these exports pay the bills of putting doctors and nurses and teachers and building schools and roads. And until they realise that, then they won't have the revenue in which to pay for it.
That's very true. We've got to get that through the heads of those who want to stop the industry dead. Turning to a resource that the new government just doesn't want to discuss. I want to talk about nuclear for a second. You've written to the Prime Minister about having a discussion about nuclear possibilities, but despite the need for clean baseload energy solutions in Australia, Anthony Albanese and his energy minister don't even want a discussion. What's going on here?
Yeah, and look, this was all about a discussion. It wasn't about saying, let's start and build nuclear power plants tomorrow, and we're not advocating for big nuclear power plants. The Nationals are probably ahead of other political parties, both our coalition partners and the Labor Party, with respect to adopting and exploring small-scale modular technology in nuclear that's developing over the Pacific in the United States. We want to create a conversation whereby we explore that, we run the ruler over it, and we put it up against other energy sources. We've just signed an agreement with the US on sharing technology information on renewables. Well, why didn't we extend that to small-scale modular technology in the nuclear sphere that is being developed in the United States? We're going to spend billions of dollars on hydrogen. Yet we've got a technology that's being developed that we don't have to pay a cent for in terms of looking at the technology. We can watch, understand, and then over the next 5, 10 years, see if it can be adopted and adapted to Australian standards to give us comfort. But as political leaders, what I wanted to do after the Prime Minister was elected and said he wanted to create a new political construct whereby we have a kind of conversation and debate about important issues, is I wanted to create that. I wanted to put my hand out and lead as a political leader and say, let's have that conversation. Let's bring Australians together and let Australians make that determination. The Nationals believe that if you empower Australians with the information, they'll determine their future, not have governments determine their energy sources or put all their eggs in one basket. This is about making sure we get back to core principles and looking at the technology that's been developed over there in small-scale modular nuclear, even carbon capture storage. If that reduces our emissions on our coal and gas, well, we've got to get back to first principles. If the first principle is about reducing emissions, why do we care about how we do it? If we can do it with traditional industries that we've got, if we can do it with the new industries like small-scale modular nuclear, and run that at ruler against hydrogen. And when Chris Bowen yells and screams and says it's the most expensive, he should look at his CSIRO report. In fact, the CSIRO report, if you look at it, there's many caveats within that report where CSIRO says that it's very difficult to put the ruler across the small-scale modular nuclear at the moment because of the acceleration in the technology and investment in that in other countries. But yet he's prepared to say that it's more dearer than hydrogen. His own report shows from CSIRO that hydrogen is in fact the dearest form. At best, it gets down to $225 a megawatt hour. And in his own report, the nuclear small-scale modular gets to $140. Yeah. And that's with where the technology, and in fact, some of the companies over there are reporting they believe they can get it underneath $60. So we're not saying we're going down this track now, but we're saying let's just peek over the Pacific. Let's see where they get to. And if we can adopt and adapt safely here, then the common sense way would be to say, let's do it. Let's do it, but let's bring Australians with us. But that takes courage and political leadership. And that's what the Nationals are saying is we want to have that courage, we want to have that leadership, we want to have that conversation with the Australian people because we believe if you empower them with the information, they'll decide. And if it doesn't, and the ruler doesn't run over it the way we think it is, we accept that. We're not trying to shove this down anyone's throat. We're just trying to lead with some maturity and with some conviction of courage of saying Australians should be brought into the tent and given the opportunity to make that determination with the information. Yep.
You can see how this is going to go. The Labor government is going to be caught out as 30 other nations adopt this small nuclear technology affordably, safely, cleanly, and we're going to be left sitting there at the altar with no one to walk up the aisle with. It's just a shocker. David Littleproud, thank you very much for coming on. Enjoy your weekend.